Merci beaucoup à nos conférenciers cet après-midi, professeur docteur, comme on dit en Allemagne, Ingrid Gogolin, et son discutant, professeur docteur Daniel Coste, de l'ENS de Lyon. Ingrid Gogolin from the University of Hamburg, qui a fait énormément de travaux sur les questions de multilinguisme, qui a beaucoup contribué aussi aux travaux, aux expertises au Conseil de l'Europe. We are very honored to have you today, Ingrid. So we leave you the floor with a talk in English et le diaporama en allemand.
Chers collègues, tout d'abord, je vous prie d'accepter mes excuses parce que la langue française est une langue que j'adore, mais je ne la parle pas. Si. So, en tout cas, c'est une langue de mon point de vue. So, and I'm going to switch now to another language which I don't really speak well, which is English. Please accept my apologies for just speaking somehow to you. And I think as we are all kind of multilinguals, we will make each other understood. Let me express it first. Ooh. It's better for me? Is that better for me? No. Okay. Let me express it first, my admiration and my sincere thanks to Nathalie and her colleagues, because you organize such an exciting and excellent event here, and a conference space for exchange. And in the end, I think that is what brings us forward the most, if we have exchange and then join forces. And thank you also very much, and give my regards to your chef, because that was such a wonderful, wasn't it? A wonderful meal all the time, wonderful meals here. Let's give them a... And a second entrance word, I would say, I would give my sincere thanks to Daniel Coste, a très cher collègue, whom I know really for ages, I'd say, and whom I admire very much. And I'm really very grateful that he took his time to go deeper into my presentation beforehand, and I'm really looking forward to your comments. So, having said this, I would like to introduce you to my presentation quickly. So, I'm speaking about languages, and I'm afraid that I'm simply somebody who would call himself or herself an empirical researcher. So I'm not able to contribute to these excellent conversations on concepts which we came across the last days. I just want to introduce you to some simple observations of reality, and then a way we try to capture these observations in an empirical design. What I'm going to do first is giving some information on the context, which you certainly all will know already, and then the major part of my presentation will be on that empirical research which we carry out, which is still ongoing in Germany, and some intermediate results of this project, and that will be it. So what you all know is linguistic diversity is nothing you can get rid of anymore in any country of the world. In Europe, it is a general feature, it is at least a general feature of migration societies, and according to the data from World Migration Report or the UNESCO, Europe is the area that takes in most immigrants since about a decade, or since about 2 decades, and Germany is the country that takes in most immigrants after the first country is always the US, but Germany then is the second country taking in immigrants since about 2 decades. So what we have to what we have to know then is that migrants from 190 countries, roughly 190 countries, live in Europe. So 190 different nationalities. And if we consider that some people have kind of counted languages, I don't know how they did it because I'm not a linguist, I must not know this, but they counted languages, and there are about 7,000 languages around the world, and it is just a simple guess, but it must be there must be much more languages in Europe than we have counted. We actually don't know anything about real linguistic reality in Europe because there is no data on Europe. But it's more or less plausible that a few of these 7,000, if people from everywhere live in the country, a few of these languages also live in Europe. So this is one of our starting points for our research. And another starting point is that there is a lot of kind of misinformation about linguistic diversity around, people believing in linguistic diversity, like, for example, this one. According to Ethnologue, there are 15 living languages in France, and I don't know how they count this, because I think there's some more. Yeah. Okay. So in a certain sense, these are simple observations. They're not really very exciting observations, theoretically, blah, blah, observations. They are simple observations of everyday life, and this is the starting point of the work in my research group. So we take these simple observations and say linguistic diversity exists. And it is a general question of our research, a general guiding question. What are the consequences of this situation of the actually existing linguistic diversity for the individual on one hand and for the society on the other hand? So as I said, people from virtually all over the world live in and cultivate their languages in their families, more or less. An observation we can also make in Europe is that this wealth inherent in these languages is usually not not supported or encouraged within the national education systems I come across. So this is one of the So this is a starting point for the research we are doing in our center. The center is called Literacy in Diversity Settings because we focus on literacy in the first place, not that much on orality in our research. And I'll show you just two examples of the research we are carrying out. The first one is called MARE. This is a project that is focused on the question if multilingual competencies, including heritage language competencies, build an asset for young people on the labor market. So this is the MARE project. Under which conditions would they build an asset on the labor market? And the other example is what is called FUDIV. This is a project on the question how could we integrate the multilingual competencies that are present in nearly every German classroom into the learning of physics. So students are expected to learn physics, but how can we make use of their linguistic competencies in their learning of physics in German? So this is German teaching, multilingual approach. So these are two examples of other projects which I'm involved with at the moment. And the one which I'm involved with most at the moment, because it's so complicated, is what we call what we call Mehrsprachigkeitsentwicklung im Zeitverlauf. So that is language development in a longitudinal perspective. That is the project I'm now going to talk about. So if we want to, so at first let me just introduce our team to you, because studies like this can't be done by a single person. So we are a team of sociolinguists, psycholinguists, psychologists, sociologists, and education researchers. So, we all work together, and none of us could have done this alone. So what we, in a nutshell, we started on a literature review, a literature review in education research. So the review gave us the impression that that the state of research in a nutshell could be posed like this. So in empirical research, if language competencies are included, such as the PISA study or the Pearl study, this is focused on reading competence. What does that mean for literacy? Is reading competence a competence that says anything about literacy? So this is one result we came across. The second one is the research is mainly focused on early language development. Language development in the course of the education career is hardly ever researched, at least to what we came across. And the third thing is most research is in fact concentrated on bilingual constellations. They are called multilingual, I don't know why, but in practice, most research is focused on two languages, then called multilingual competencies. So, and what we also found is we didn't find any studies with substantial samples. So what we find mostly is small-scale studies, and we did not find any. We didn't find larger studies with measured language competence. Most studies are based on self-assessment data, if they are larger studies. And we didn't find many studies in a real long-term perspective. Most studies are assuming a long-term perspectives in that they do research on different age groups, but they do not do research on the same individuals. And that would, according to my reading, not be a longitudinal perspective. Okay, so that was what we came across when we did this first review. And what we did then is, how can we solve at least some of these problems in one project, asking ourselves which linguistic, personal, and contextual conditions influence the acquisition of multilingual competencies, positively or negatively. Then how do these conditions change over time, longitudinal perspective, and how do they interact with each other over time? And what is the connection with other indicators of educational success, especially in the phase of transition from school to work? So in order to answer these questions, or questions of that type, empirically, you have to consider a number of influencing factors. And in a nutshell, this is kind of this. You have to consider the input. So language contact, language practice in the family, et cetera, et cetera. You have to consider social and social cultural factors, social capital, SES, family's cultural capital, and in the case of migration, definitely you have to consider integration or acculturation factors. And you have to consider individual factors such as cognitive potential, such as motivation, volition, etc. So this is a bunch of factors which you have to consider once you want to give an information about language development, according to our reading. And here we face challenge number one. Challenge number one for our project was how to measure all this and how to include a sound measurement into one research project. So then we have problem number two, that is the challenge how to measure competence in multiple languages, because what we did not come across is instruments which we could use in comparison of languages giving the same information about the language in the end. So we didn't find any, except of C-tests, which are fairly nice. But in that case, we wanted to also to have productive competencies, so we had to produce them, the instruments ourselves. So that was it about our challenges, and now I show you how we tried to solve all these problems. What we did is we developed a two-cohort sequence design study with 4 waves of data collection in a period of 4 school years, starting with class 7, which is around 13-year-old students in the German system, to class 9, which is then 16, 17 years old. And then the second cohort started in class 9, and we followed this cohort until class 11, which is about the end of the education system. So, and as we have 2 times class 9, we can compare the 2 cohorts. So this is a simple two cohort sequence design which we applied. This was our first study over 4 years, and then we were so lucky to be granted another big grant for the second study, doing 2 more years, and this is the 2 more years are in the phase of going to either academic education or professional education, then starting the way into the professionals, into work. But I'm not talking about the second one today, because there we have the data only by the end of last year, so we didn't do much, we were not able to publish much as yet on the second one. I have to introduce you to our concept of Mehrsprachigkeit, multilingual, blah, blah, I don't know. So in Germany, after somebody went to school, you wouldn't find a monolingual person. Every child learns German at school, and every child learns at least one foreign language, and in, say, kind of 90% of the cases, this would be English. About 50% of the regular school cohorts learn a second foreign language in secondary education. So these children are, in a way, multilingual. This is one way of getting multilingual. Then you have the children who have another or many other languages, some other language, more than one, in their families, or dialects, probably. For example, go to Switzerland, you have some, well, at least I consider this is some German which is distinct from mine. These children learn language in their families or elsewhere. So this is also something they bring to the education system. And in many cases, this part of language development is primarily oral. Because in the German education system, less than 10% of the children, for example, with an immigrant background have the chance to get access to schooling in their heritage languages. So it's less than 10%. So this concept, so this is what we consider a multilingual person. And that means in any case, we have to integrate all those children who live in a monolingual family in our multilingual sample. So this is what we consider to be multilingual kids, and we try to test them in different languages with respect to their literacy development. So this concept, in a certain sense, mirrors the actual language reality in Germany. I don't know if this is the case for other countries, but in Germany this would be the case. What did we do? What did we do for measurement? So we wanted to map all these challenges in the project, and we wanted to map this as accurately as possible. This is always compromise. So what we did is language testing in all these languages with exemplar heritage languages. So all kids we had were tested in German. All were tested in English because they were all English, all had English in their school careers. So then we had a cohort of German-Russian speakers from the Russian immigrant minority, not the Russian in the sense of nationality, but the Russian-speaking part of the world. And we had a cohort of German, Turkish-speaking minorities. So we had these two, what we call heritage languages, bilingual kids in our sample. And then we measured French or Russian as a second language, because by the time we started to develop this project, Russian was the second foreign language in Germany. When we did carry out our data collection, this was not the case anymore, so we hardly found any children learning Russian as a second foreign language at school. So Russian is somehow fading away at the moment. But we have a considerable part, substantial part of students learning French as a second language, which is a good message to you, isn't it? Yeah. So what we measured productive language competence, means writing, and we measured reading, both. We measured cognitive potential and all the a whole lot of background factors, social, individual, and contextual background factors. And we had some information about the schools the children visited. So what kind of programs do they have? So this was kind of a mirror of every influencing factor which I showed you before. And now I show you what we gave them as tests. So for reading, that was fairly easy because there is a standardized reading comprehension test, which is really very well tested in Germany, and we could just apply this one and transfer this to the other languages which we tested also. For Russian, we adapted the tests to Russian as well in Cyrillic script as in the Latin alphabet, because that's what we did. So that was fairly easy to develop the instrument. For writing, it was not that easy because there was nothing around. What we did is we produced a test with pictorial stimuli, and these stimuli were used in all languages, so they were in all languages the same. So what we did, we used the same instrument for measuring all the languages we measured. We elicited a standard text style, a mixture of instruction and narration, expository writing, because our project relates to education. So this is something which is in the world of schooling, plays a role. We developed a theoretically based model of analysis, the same model for all languages, despite of the language differences. So this is the model. It is fairly simple. It is based on a pragmatic perspective of on language performance. So it is not really interesting for us what is the grammatical consistency, etc., etc. But it is interesting for us, is the individual speaker able to express what he or she wants to express? And so the model, the construct of writing skills in German is based on textual indicators, lexicosyntactic indicators, and productivity. That is just a technical thing, because the longer a text is, the more chances a child has to produce more text, which are indicators. And this model is applied to all languages on the basis of the concepts, but certainly not on the basis of indicators, because there the languages differ. Is that clear? Oh, okay. So this is our model. It wasn't really very easy to develop it, but in the end, we are really very lucky, and I give you some indicators for that. So this is our sample. We had in the sample 2,103 students in this age range, which I told you, on 78 schools in Germany, in 8 federal states, which doesn't matter for you here. All of them were tested, as I said, in German and English, about 50% additionally in Turkish and Russian, and about 920 additionally in French or Russian, whereas in Russian, actually, we had lower than 70, not even 70 pupils. So most of them were second foreign language, French. So this is just for illustration. This is the type of text we received. On the same impulse, these are the texts. Just an impression. So this is one way. I think this is one of the 8th grade. So we are so happy that we developed an instrument which is reliable. So we tested the reliability of the instrument over all waves. And what you can see is it is reliable. It's close to 1, which is better than we would have expected. And we're so happy about that, because this was a whole lot of work. So we do at least rely on these instruments. And what we have now is our treasure. So we have roughly 7,000 texts, written texts, of students in the languages I told you. So not in every language the same numbers. And we needed about 3,700 hours to transcribe them. So that took us some while. But this is a treasure I will frankly offer to you, because we make this data public. So public. Everyone who has a research interest, which can be proved, can get the data. And I hope, code mixers, code switches, that should be a treasure for you. This is not my business. I don't understand any of that, but it's open for you. So I'll just give you 2 impressions about what we found out now. You have to keep in mind that we ended collecting data about not even 2 years ago, so we are still in the process of analyzing, and this will take some more time, and probably some of you have fun in cooperating with us. I show you example questions. So question 1, we were concerned with the interrelation between reading and writing. So this is one of the problems, the PISA data is presented in Germany. Those kids who can't read in German are not competent in German. So this is the message. And those kids who speak another language than German at home are at risk. So this is a major message. And we were dealing with this message. And the first question we wanted to know is, are there effects from reading to writing competencies? Do they function in the same way in German, when they write German, or when they write in the heritage languages? So the starting point of that question is that there is a lot of literature that gives evidence of positive effects from reading ability to writing. So saying that somebody should read more in order to be able to write better. And this finding is consistent with a lot of theoretical assumptions and the acquisition of writing competences should be positively affected by reading ability. So this is one body of research which is really very rich. And we are really happy that we also find these effects. We find in our sample effects, now this is an example from 3 waves, effects, positive effects from reading to writing in German. So you see reading comprehension, writing comprehension, you see the blue arrow, this is the positive effects. And these effects explain all. So there is no residuum. So there's nothing left. So that's fine. But what we wanted to know is that also the same effect if we see writing in the heritage languages? And here we found no, it doesn't. We have no positive effect from reading competence, from reading to writing, but the other way around. We have a positive effect from from writing competences to reading competences. And we have a big residual. You see I don't know where you see it, the 26, the 0.26 residual. So that's a big residual. So either there is something we didn't measure, or there is something we didn't analyze in this analysis. So both is possible. But in any case, the assumption that always the effects are in the same direction seems not to be true. And we didn't know, we're not finished with analyzing this, but we have some assumptions about what could be the case, what could be behind this. And we assume that the monolingual model of influence, which is the one that always shows the other direction, is not transferable in the case of a language that is usually learned by oral practice, and usually not by every day, and usually not formally trained. So in that case, is maybe the amount of mastering orally is not influenced by reading, because these are 2 very different activities, and maybe the influence, we could maybe show the influence, and this is something we are still finding out, within this part of our cohort who had formal education in the heritage languages. But this is a very small part of our cohort. So this is a problem to solve, and please, everybody is invited to help us solve this problem. So, second example I would like to show you is it concerns the writing skills. And in this case, the writing skills of immigrant students. And please keep in mind that not many of them have formal education in writing. The reason for this analysis is the recurrent fear, which is expressed in German public, among teachers, among politicians, that if you invest too much in a heritage language writing competencies, this takes away potential from learning proper German. So writing disturbs learning, writing your heritage language disturbs the development of the other language. If this were the case, we would find patterns in our data of students with particularly high writing skills in the heritage language and weaker skills in German. So this would have to be the pattern then, which we would have to find. And possibly only English plays a role in this. So thus we wanted to know what patterns of writing skills do we find among among speakers of the heritage languages German, Turkish, and German, Russian. So what we did is we used the writing samples of roughly 800 of our bilingual students in one wave. and we carried out I should say they are the 15-year-olds, these ones. We carried out a latent class analysis as a structural equation model. That is the model here. So this is what we found. Hooray. All students are dominant in German. What you see here is the overall means of German, heritage language, and English. And you have the three profiles. You have one profile, the green one, which is actually the largest part of the cohort, where the kids score below average in heritage language, German and English. So this is the green profile. Then a second largest part of our sample is the blue profile, where kids score in the middle. And we have a very small group of outliers. They score high in every language. So what does that mean? It means a good writer is a good writer, and a bad writer is a bad writer. And these profiles don't cross. So that means writing in a heritage language is at least no harm for writing in German, and hooray, German is the best language in writing for everybody, for the German kids as well as for those. So this is a message we can pass on also to teachers. Don't be afraid of heritage languages. They don't do any harm to anybody, or at least not as far as we know. So we are now about further analysis in this respect in the longitudinal perspective, and here you see the perspective also with the last two measurement points. These are the first analysis of all 6 measurement points. And what you can see here is German stays stable the best over the 6 years of schooling and transfer to work. Then the heritage languages in English, they kind of crisscross. Sometimes in this career, the heritage language scores higher than English, but towards the end of schooling, English scores higher. And this is no surprise for us because, there is education in English, whereas probably in the heritage language there is not. And what is also not a surprise is that French scores lowest during all measurement points, but that is the least input the kids have. And so this is also not a surprise. And we are very happy because we have no surprises. And now we're in the analysis of effects we find between the languages. And what we can see now is that there are positive effects as well from English on German as from the heritage languages on writing in German. And there are positive effects from German on English writing through the time. So these are only 3 measurement points, not all 4, not all 6. But there is no effect from German to heritage languages. So the other way around, German to heritage language in this study didn't work. Well, but in any case, this is again proof for the idea that being multilingual, having access to reading, writing in a heritage language, doesn't harm language development. And I think in the European context, I don't know about the American context, but in the European context, at least in my European context, this is a very important message. So what was I going to say? So we find indications of an underlying general literacy competence. And this reminds us on Jim Commins's illustration of the iceberg. So on the surface, the language is developed differently, but there seems to be something underneath which is in contact. So we found close interrelations between the writing competencies in the multiliteracy repertoires of the students, even if their access to formal literacy is low. That is the case for the heritage languages. And consequently, multiple literacy is no obstacle to the development of literal skills in the different languages that together, from our point of view, build the repertoire of an individual. And it's no obstacle for good development in the majority language. So next steps of our research will be the deeper analysis of cross-language effects in the multiliterate resources, and these analyses are only possible because we have the longitudinal format, which allows us also to apply longitudinal panel models. That means we can also try and find cause and effect. And with this, I would once again like to express my invitation to you all. So we have a wealth of data, and we invite you cordially to make use of this wealth of data. Please feel free to drop me a line if you wish to do that. And I think the other kind invitation is let's join forces. For example, we developed a network, Next Generation Literacies, which is very close to what is being done here. And just let's join forces, because I think this would be fairly good for next steps. Je vous remercie de votre attention et j'attends avec plaisir les commentaires de mon très cher collègue Daniel Coste. I don't know.
Let's get out of there.
Yeah, that's the problem. I don't know. We'll just close it there.
Processing it from there.
And close it again, then you get rid of it.
Sorry. J'ai un écran qui bloque le reste. Pardon? OK? Je veux pas couper, je veux pas mettre fin.
No, just the blue one. The-
Ah. Non. Oui.
De quoi vous avez besoin?
C'est derrière, je pense.
Ah, vous cherchez là.
Peut-être.
Je vous mets en diaporama.
Oui. Diaporama,
Quoi?
l'écran. Merci. Bon, désolé de cet incident technique, mais ça détend l'atmosphère en même temps. Well, I'm glad to return to Ingrid, the first mention she made of our, long relation. And I think my first reaction, quand j'ai lu la contribution d'Ingrid, je me suis dit « Waouh !» Puis ma deuxième réaction, ça a été « Zut !» Qu'est-ce que je vais pouvoir dire? Et bon, façon plaisante peut-être de marquer mes réactions, mais je crois que il est clair que ce qui vient de nous être présenté est quelque chose de tout à fait exemplaire dans notre domaine. Et je pense que c'est surtout là-dessus que je vais essayer d'insister en reprenant en fait des caractéristiques de ce qui a été présenté, et puis en essayant quand même ensuite d'ouvrir un petit peu, mais sur une perspective que tu as évoquée, Ingrid, à savoir comment est-ce qu'on coordonne des choses qui pour l'instant sont plutôt dispersées. Alors les commentaires sont ici en italien, comme ça nous avons 4 langues dans cette session. C'est ce que Nathalie souhaitait. Donc. Je crois que le premier commentaire qui nous frappe sans doute tous, c'est à quel point le projet est ambitieux au départ. Je crois que le schéma présentant les facteurs environnementaux, sociaux, les facteurs psychologiques, le côté de l'input, ça pose énormément de questions de nature différente, et je crois que il est assez rare d'avoir des projets de recherche qui comportent cet ensemble de dimensions. Alors ça suppose bien sûr l'appel à des compétences diverses, et je crois que Ingrid nous a rappelé que l'équipe qui a été constituée n'est pas faite que de linguistes ou de spécialistes de l'éducation, mais qu'elle comporte aussi des sociolinguistes, des sociologues, des psychologues, etc. Je crois que c'est une nécessité, à l'évidence, d'avoir un travail pluridisciplinaire comme cela a été envisagé. Ce qui m'a retenu aussi, comme vous sans doute, c'est le fait que malgré l'ampleur en quelque sorte des questionnements, l'équipe a décidé de focaliser sur un développement individuel de compétences plurilingues, avec en outre une insistance particulière sur la relation à la littératie. Et ce faisant, je crois que c'était à la base du projet, il fallait véritablement inclure toutes les langues. Les langues, bien sûr, d'origine, d'héritage, etc., d'enfants qui ont une exposition russophone ou une exposition turcophone, mais bien évidemment les germanophones natifs, si on peut dire, et puis la prise en compte des langues qui font partie du cursus scolaire. Et ça, c'est un autre point qui m'a frappé aussi, c'est à quel point le projet de recherche s'inscrit véritablement dans le cadre éducatif dans son ensemble. On prend en compte l'ensemble du curriculum, on prend en compte différents types de langues présentes dans l'espace scolaire, et on étale en plus sur la durée pratiquement de l'enseignement secondaire, sur plusieurs classes, sur plusieurs niveaux. À ma connaissance en tout cas, mais je ne suis pas spécialiste de ce genre de travaux, mais il y a assez peu de recherches qui essaient de travailler sur cette durée, qui implique en plus la durée temporelle. Ça demande un certain nombre d'années pour construire la méthodologie, ça demande un certain nombre d'années pour recueillir les données, et ça demande sans doute encore plus d'années pour les exploiter complètement ensuite. Donc tout ça, ça demande bien sûr aussi une certaine durée dans les financements, ou des relais dans les financements. Ça suppose sans doute qu'on a affaire à des équipes qui sont des équipes reconnues et qui sont considérées comme faisant du bon travail. Ce qui m'a frappé tout à l'heure dans un échange avec c'est une petite parenthèse, mais je crois qu'il a à faire avec notre propos, avec un échange avec un collègue britannique, on parlait des appels à projets et des financements, et il me disait c'est important d'être une équipe connue, mais en même temps, à chaque fois qu'on présente un projet, il faut qu'il soit très différent du précédent, sinon les financeurs ont l'impression qu'on se répète. Mais je pense que c'est une leçon aussi pour nous d'une certaine manière, et je crois que tu l'as illustré en montrant que les projets antérieurs étaient sur un autre terrain d'une certaine manière. On était toujours dans un cadre scolaire et autres, mais il y avait une interrogation distincte. Alors, parmi les dimensions qui sont fortes, je crois, c'est que on a en fait accumulé un capital important de données. Tu as rappelé l'importance du nombre de textes mis à disposition de la communauté. Je crois que c'est généreux, d'autant plus que c'est peut-être maintenant plus facilement exploitable par d'autres équipes, compte tenu de la numérisation. Parce qu'il fut un temps où on proposait généreusement à d'autres équipes des données, mais les données étaient très très peu exploitables, compte tenu des conditions dans lesquelles elles avaient été réunies, et puis des formes qu'elles avaient prises. Là, je crois qu'on a un capital qui est un capital vraiment collectif, d'une certaine manière, et on peut espérer, comme tu le fais, que ça donnera lieu à mobilisations diverses. Alors, j'ai un certain nombre de commentaires complémentaires qui élargissent un petit peu, parce que j'étais vraiment mal à l'aise pour en dire plus que ce que tu as pu montrer. Donc, il y a un point qui me soucie et qui pourra peut-être faire l'objet d'une discussion, c'est à quel moment est-ce qu'on enclenche des facteurs que tu as appelés les background factors et que tu avais présenté dans une des diapos initiales, avec justement ces facteurs psychosociaux, etc., etc. Comment est-ce qu'on les fait entrer en ligne de compte dans l'interprétation des données? J'ai l'impression que ça, c'est à venir. Mais la question que je me pose, c'est est-ce qu'on va pouvoir travailler ces background factors avec le même type d'analyse et le même type d'instrument que ceux qui ont été utilisés pour les questions relatives à la literacy telle qu'observée dans les... Donc, ça, c'est pour moi une question, je crois, qui est d'intérêt un petit peu collectif, parce que d'une certaine manière, et c'est un point suivant que je voudrais aborder, ça situe des problématiques d'articulation entre, me semble-t-il, des recherches à dominante quantitative et des recherches à entrée vraiment qualitative. Je me demande jusqu'à un certain point si l'exploitation ultérieure d'un certain nombre de données, les entretiens avec les familles, qu'est-ce qui se passe en termes de pratiques familiales, etc. Comment est-ce que tout ça a été enregistré d'une certaine manière, et comment est-ce que... Alors c'est peut-être là que les sociolinguistes, les sociologues, etc., vont rentrer dans la course plus directement. Mais il me semble que c'est une question qui dépasse le projet, parce qu'on la rencontre ailleurs. Mais dans la mesure où le projet est exemplaire, il me semble poser cette question en même temps. Alors, mes derniers commentaires seront plus généraux. C'est-à-dire que on a affaire, en fait, je crois, dans ce qui parcourt le domaine actuellement, à deux types d'orientation qui ne sont pas simplement du type qualitatif-quantitatif, mais qui sont du type gros objet de recherche et, d'un autre côté, petite expérience de chatouillage du système. Petites expériences où on essaie de voir des choses qui peuvent se passer si on intervient de façon, en quelque sorte, intrusive dans le système. Alors, j'essaie d'expliquer là-dessus. Je crois que le choix que vous avez fait, c'est on pose des questions qui sont des questions d'intérêt social. En particulier, est-ce que la présence d'enfants d'origine diverse affecte les résultats, notamment ceux des élèves germanophones sans plus, Et en même temps, on ne touche pas au système. On observe. Il n'y a pas de trafic, en quelque sorte, sur la façon dont les choses fonctionnent. Il y a d'autres projets qui ont une dimension plus intrusive, comme je le disais tout à l'heure, c'est-à-dire qui rentrent dans le système en essayant de le faire bouger peut-être, mais à la marge et sur une toute petite surface. Et la question que je me pose, c'est comment est-ce qu'on articule en quelque sorte ces deux types de travaux? Si on a une perspective qui est une perspective quand même d'intervention. Je crois que la perspective que vous avez, ce n'est pas simplement une perspective de recherche en tant que telle, mais c'est de montrer qu'il y a des choses, des opinions qui circulent, qui peuvent être contestées par un certain nombre de résultats. Donc il y a un effet social, à l'évidence, et puis au départ, en même temps, je pense, un souci social. Avec des limites, et, je reviens peut-être un petit peu en arrière là. Ce qui m'a frappé, c'est ce que tu disais, là, on n'a pas pu montrer qu'il y avait un effet positif de la dimension lecture sur la dimension écriture, s'agissant des élèves ayant des origines russophones ou turcophones. Mais en même temps, dans une conversation privée que nous avons eue, tu m'as dit, l'hypothèse, c'est que de toute façon, il y a moins de lecture, il y a moins de littératie dans les contextes familiaux, et que ça pèse aussi sur ce qui peut se passer ensuite. C'est un peu ce que j'entendais tout à l'heure sur le rapport entre les facteurs, en quelque sorte, autres que ceux qui ont été directement étudiés, et peut-être l'importance à ce moment-là d'avoir des concours et peut-être des instruments d'analyse un petit peu différents. Mais je reviens à mon questionnement antérieur. Je crois que une des questions qu'on peut se poser au vu du domaine actuellement, c'est qu'on a d'un côté, je dirais pas de grosses machines, mais des études qui sont des études qui se donnent les moyens et qui reçoivent les moyens d'obtenir des résultats qui sont des résultats montrables, prouvant un certain nombre de choses, faisant modifier les représentations, etc. Surtout quand c'est présenté de façon agréable. Je crois qu'il y a un problème aussi qui est un problème de diffusion de ces résultats. Comment est-ce qu'on les diffuse du côté du politique? Comment est-ce qu'on les diffuse du côté du grand public? Comment est-ce qu'on les diffuse à un groupe de chercheurs, etc. Je crois que tout ça, ça fait partie aussi de la problématique. Et le constat, donc, c'est d'un côté des grosses études de ce type, et qui sont absolument nécessaires, me semble-t-il, et d'un autre côté, une multitude d'études plus ponctuelles. Il s'en fait énormément en France en particulier en ce moment, sur l'effet que telle ou telle démarche, dans telle ou telle classe multilingue, plurilingue, etc., peut avoir sur les représentations des parents, sur les représentations des élèves, etc., etc. Mais ça reste du micro, et c'est surtout répété de plus en plus. Je suis assez frappé par le fait que dans un certain nombre de publications qu'on lit, à chaque fois on dit c'est intéressant, ça a été fait dans tel contexte, mais ça a déjà été dit, ça a déjà été montré par une autre petite recherche interventionniste. Je crois que c'est la question que moi je voudrais poser un petit peu plus généralement. Qu'est-ce qu'on fait de tout ça? Si notre projet collectif, c'est socialement, politiquement, de faire bouger les choses, les représentations, peut-être les pratiques, peut-être les systèmes, comment est-ce qu'on fait en sorte qu'on cumule, qu'on met ensemble en quelque sorte tout ce qui existe déjà pour lui donner une plus grande visibilité et un plus grand impact. Alors, je ne sais pas si dans les projets Plurensa à travers le monde, il y a quelque chose comme ça qui peut se dessiner, mais je crois qu'on en est à une étape où on a besoin absolument de tabler sur tout ce qui a été accumulé, avec l'idée qu'on n'en tire pas tous les bénéfices qu'on pourrait déjà en tirer. Voilà ce que je souhaitais dire simplement. Et merci encore à Ingrid pour votre...
Just one more information on probably what I didn't explain because it was so natural to me. All the data I presented to you was controlled for all these factors. So the data I present to you about read the directions were controlled for all the background factors. So we pretended then by statistical procedures that these students have no difference in whatever, social, etc., etc. So this is what we used to do. We use our background factors to control if there are influences on the results. And I should have explained this. I just simply forgot. Sorry.
Sorry, I misread you. Qui est-ce qui... Il y a plus on a perdu un modérateur.
Because I think we're happy to
Yeah, sure.
Please go ahead. Should I bring that mic to you?
Merci. Donc, c'est pas vraiment une question. C'est un commentaire. Donc, dans la lignée de ce que vous venez de dire, Daniel Coste, par rapport à ce que je vois comme une espèce un manque d'engagement envers la société et de nos recherches. Mais je pense que c'est à cause d'une espèce de perversion de la recherche dans les universités, dans le sens où on est continuellement poussé à produire, à publier, surtout dans certains pays où on est vraiment dans la bibliométrie à fond. Et l'autre jour, justement, en Espagne, il y a un scandale par rapport à des chercheurs qui ont une double filiation. Ils ont une seconde filiation universitaire qui est fausse. Et ils sont payés pour, voilà, quand ils signent des papers, des articles, mettre une autre université du Moyen-Orient qui lui paye, qui la paye pour ça. Bon, il y a eu des cessations d'emploi, des salaires, bon, ça a fait tout un scandale. Et l'autre jour à la presse, on lisait une déclaration qui disait « Les universités espagnoles sont devenues des macro-fermes de productrices des projets ». Et c'est vrai qu'on répond à des projets locaux, des projets nationaux, des projets internationaux, et on a l'impression qu'on passe son temps à remplir des formulaires, à montrer qu'on a travaillé, mais après, ça ne s'est pas transféré dans la société. Enfin, surtout depuis, je pense, un domaine comme celui de l'éducation, ça serait tellement plus facile, je pense. Et donc, juste, c'était ça, par rapport à ce que vous avez dit. C'est pas très joyeux, mais voilà, je voulais le partager.
Commentaires, questions?
So can I give it? I would just say projects like ours are also dedicated to support researchers to do research without this large investment. So our project was about 3.8 million euros. And I'm sure that not everybody can get this much money. So our project is on infrastructure to the research community. And as far as I'm informed about research funding schemes, developing research funding schemes, at least in the European context, European community, etc. context, that the reuse of existing research data is beginning, it was not always the case, but it is beginning to be validated. So it's beginning to be a new strategy of funding research, make reuse of existing data. For example, the German research foundations, they always ask if you do ask for a new project, is it necessary to produce new data? And I think it is also kind of our own responsibility to change this sad story, like you was. That is not a Spanish story. I think we all come across this kind of development, but it is our responsibility to change it in a certain sense, and that is also one of my motivations to give away the data. I mean. So you can make small things with it or big things with it. If it's research, it's fine with me. The other thing I wanted to say is I feel that there is no contradiction between large-scale data and small-scale data because, they have just different purposes, different aims. They don't answer the same questions, but they can you spoke of, what I really appreciate is you spoke of accumulation of knowledge. Mm-hmm. So if we want to do that, we have to build on each other. That's a simple thing. And I mean, so that is why I think this kind of conferences is so important, that we have the chance to build on each other because we can't read everything. But now I've heard so many interesting presentations. Now I'm going to read them. And then we could probably come to terms with joint activities. And that's what I really appreciate about this event, and also about your communication. I take that with me. La diffusion des résultats, c'est encore, that's also a problem, because I have decided that I do write a certain type of text because I'm able to write other types of text. I'm not a journalist. So also in that respect, I try to cooperate with people who are experts for other types of texts in order to translate our results into other publics. And what I really do love is cooperate with teachers, translate our results into brochures for teachers, or into our website, or things like that. And that is so enriching, I can tell you. I learn a lot about by their translation about my work. And I think we have to introduce more of these strategies into our research. We do our research, but then we have also, we have publicly financed. So we are responsible for what we do, and we have to give something back to the public. And so we can't do it all ourselves. We need partners. So again, let's join forces.